When I watched a video from my friend Sasha just before Christmas, I knew I had to try using Distress Oxide inks and photo paper, even though it meant cheating on my favorite Catherine Pooler inks. But actually, watch to see how this Juniper mist ended up saving the day. We received this Christmas card this year, and I loved it so much that I wanted to recreate it. There are lots of ways to get a similar look, but since I wanted to try Sasha's technique, it was the perfect time. Here's an A2 size panel of photo paper. This is Koala Ultra Premium with a satin finish. I got it on Amazon and it was pretty inexpensive. And here's my Oxide colors. I do have a small collection of Oxide inks that I've kept over the years, and I recently picked up a couple more to try and get the colors I was going for. The inspiration card has horizontal swoopy stripes, but I can also see a subtle vertical layer behind those stripes. So to start, I swiped Peacock feathers downward, and then a little Uncharted mariner. I used a light hand to get stripy coverage at this point. Then I started with my swoops, going heavier-handed in a horizontal motion. I started with Uncharted mariner, then chipped sapphire, wilted violet, seedless preserves, and finally the peacock feathers again. I think it looks pretty good compared to my inspiration, and you can see as it's drying that distinctive chalky finish is showing up, kind of dulling the colors a little bit. We want it completely dry before the next step, which is to use a wet cloth, and I'm just using water with a microfiber cloth here, but you can use a wipe if you prefer, just to wipe off that chalky layer. Every time I do this, my heart does a little jump, thinking I haven't let the panel dry enough and I'm just smearing everything around. But when I keep working at it, even spritzing the paper itself, eventually I see that only that top coating is coming off, leaving beautifully vibrant colors. I guess in my mind, the two parts of the oxides are separating. The dye is soaked into the photo paper, but the chalky pigment portion is sitting on top. Now I like this, but it's a little light, so I went back in and I added some more of the chipped sapphire to darken it up. And then I removed the chalky layer from that, and now I think it's working much better. So you can layer it up if you want, which is of course one of the features of Oxide inks. I wanted some gold splatter for stars in my night sky, but I wasn't sure whether it would ever dry on this photo paper, so I just gave it a try. I used my regular Altenew metallic watercolors, and it's super pretty. And it did dry. It took a little longer than normal, but within about 20 minutes, I was able to run my hand over it with no smearing or transfer. Okay, we all know that practice makes perfect, and I have a church Christmas card project, so I decided to make 29 more cards to really get a lot of experience quickly to really cement this technique in my mind. I decided on a 2-for-1 design, which I'll show you in a minute, so I needed to make 14 more colored panels. I grabbed 4 full sheets of the photo paper, and I started with the vertical stripes and then continued with the swoopy horizontal stripes. It didn't take long before I realized that my chipped sapphire is dry. I've had this one probably since it first came out, so I can't really complain about that. I kept working on the 4 panels with all my other colors and trying to get every last drop of that sapphire onto them. I even pulled in Villainous Potion, which is a deep purple, to try and get some more of that darkness I was wanting. After wiping off the 4 large panels, I could see that my night skies were really not dark enough, but I wasn't sure what to do about it. In my desperation, I turned back to my one true love, my Catherine Pooler inks, and I grabbed my Juniper mist ink and a blending brush. I trimmed the large panels into card fronts, and I started blending with the Juniper mist over top, mostly coming in from around the edges, but also just darkening up some of those swoopy stripes. I had no idea if the paper could absorb it or it would just sit on top, or if it would smear the oxides underneath, but it worked perfectly. So then I thought, hey, maybe I don't need oxides. Maybe I can just use my Catherine Pooler inks. I started with a clean A2 panel of my photo paper, and I put down some of the colors that I thought were pretty close, and then I set it aside to dry, while I kept adding Juniper mist to the rest of my panels. When I came back and started adding the Juniper mist blending over top, they did layer up, but I really didn't like the look as much as I liked the oxides. Now, to be fair, I didn't do that vertical stripe underneath, and I didn't really add any Juniper mist stripes to the horizontal layer, so maybe I didn't really give this a fair shot. But I already had all my panels for these cards, so I'll save that to try again another day. Once I had all my panels blended and splattered, it was time to assemble. Before Christmas, I made 30 of these white dove die cuts. This is a 2-piece die set from D's Distinctively Dies, which gives some subtle dimension by gluing the second wing behind the body, and I added some sparkle with some Stardust stickles. I had also cut 30 Tim Holtz piece sentiments, and I had added some stickles to them. My 2-for-1 design was to cut a circle from the blended panel and also from a navy panel, and then swap the circles before adding the dove and the sentiment. For the first two, I also embossed the panels with the Altenew Dotty Circles embossing folder, and I really like the look. When I'm making this many of the same card, adding that extra step takes extra time. Plus, that bumpy surface made it trickier to glue down the narrow sentiment. Since making these cards, I've done a bit more research, and I found that there's lots of videos on using oxides on photo paper on YouTube, and a ton of variations and techniques. So I'm excited to try some of those and get even more use from my now growing oxide collection. I'm also excited to learn a little bit more about the properties of this photo paper and how to incorporate it into my card making. Have you tried this before? Any advice for me? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.